and get this started.
Ericka, welcome. What a pleasure. It's it's such an honor to sit and chat with you today. And I'm really just going to jump right in. I got to meet you for a second virtually at one of the ambassador meet and greets at Lululemon, where we both hold this position. And I was really in awe of you because we had this really interesting moment where we were speaking with the designers, and you actually spoke up about the opportunity that Lululemon had to present gear, right? To present clothing and things like that that were specifically designed for the BIPOC community. And you touched on the fact that in the Olympics, there was a huge issue around swim caps, and the Olympic team had sort of, there was this whole mess around that. But I really want you to speak to that experience and your thoughts on it, and just talk to us about all of this with Lululemon and how you felt afterwards, and just begin to touch on this.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I will also share too that in the recording, we're all at home. I have a dog and it's Pavlov. So when I speak, she thinks it's time to play. So, I am super grateful that you reached out to me afterwards, because I will say in that moment, I felt my heart beat out of my chest. And that's something that I'm continuously working on, is really opening up my throat chakra more, and speaking truth into spaces that where truth needs to be spoken, and the thing that needs to be said, and doing that in a way that is kind, respectful, and really elevates the whole, and brings an element of dimension of diversity to the conversation. By day, I am a diversity and equity and inclusion professional. So I look for the things that have gaps, and where can we fill the gaps? And particularly the conversation that we were doing our ambassador onboarding for Lululemon, which was really great. And it was really amazing to hear that they took time to bring all of the ambassadors together in North America to talk about product and really listening to ways that it could be more accessible, from ability to particular like an individual specialty with their sweat train or yoga. And one of the things that that just kept coming to me is, Lululemon is an incredible brand with an amazing product. And what we saw in the Olympics is really an equity around a sport historically. When you look at segregation with swimming historically, and it was Soul Cap that was banned in the Olympics for not being like Olympic qualified. I don't even know. So what the reasoning was. And I looked at that and I said, well, okay, that is marginalizing Black women, where we already see the stigmas, the statistics on Blacks in swimming, Black women in swimming, and a lot of it has to do around hair. And then when you laser that out and you look at, particularly, I'm going to get really specific in the dimension of Black women, historically, and I'll say that this was generationally passed to me, but I was more of an athlete and didn't really care. So I got my dad's genes on that side and didn't care. But my mom definitely infused in me, or tried to infuse in me, about like, oh my gosh, you're running, you're going to sweat your hair out, or this is going to happen with your hair, or you got to get your hair done, and all these things. And I frankly didn't care. I wanted to run track, be in sports, do my thing. And I understand it. And when you look at the industry of Black women in hair care, it's over $1 billion industry. And so when I think about what is like a barrier, like an unconscious barrier to wellness for Black women, a lot of what I subconsciously hear sometimes is around hair, sweating out hairs, especially in yoga studio, like in a yoga studio or practice, which is hot yoga. And that's real. That's culturally real. And that conversation came up, and, you know, I think that that was a stunned response, like a stunned question to receive. And I think that it showed the ability for brands like Lululemon to expand in supplier diversity. Like, you know, Soul Cap has been around for a while, and a company doesn't need to have the answer or be the ones that are the creator. But it's like, wow, we just saw this inequity play out in the Olympics. And so we're going to be the ones to step in and do it. It's very similar to the Final Four, women's basketball in the US, or the tournament, the NCAA tournament, when the women's locker rooms or weight rooms, the training facilities was completely different. And so Dick's Sporting Goods said, guess what? We have semis packed up and ready to go. And we're gonna bring all the equipment so that you can train properly. To me, that was so meant, like that brand swept in and said, we have the solution. And so I think brands like Lululemon have the clout, they have the power and the influence to say, you're going to create it inequitable for someone to live to their fullest potential through swim. Well, guess what? We're going to design, and we're going to break through the barriers of whatever the constituents were in the Olympic review, which we could go on about the inequities in the Olympics in itself. But we're going to really be bold and push to change this policy, and to really look at the policy. Because when you look at the swimming Olympians that are in the pool, it's heavily white, and we want to change that, and that needs to be changed. And so I think brands like that can really push on large organizations, such as collectively, like it's not just going to be Lululemon, right? It also needs to be the Nike, the Adidas, etc., which Nike, you know, did the hijab for female Muslim athletes. But all of those brands collectively together demanding the field of sports and sweat to change, because we are creating more spaces for all people to have access to it. And more people are interested in it because they know the benefits of it. And so of sweat and swimming and all of the things, like I believe that our generation is more educated in the benefits of movement, and value it at a higher regard than some previous generations. And so we can't have like the same equipment that we did 10 years ago and then think that that's going to be okay.
Absolutely. I love that you spoke so deeply to this issue, because it's brands like Lululemon, it's brands like Nike, it's brands like Adidas who encourage, right? Who encourage the change that we are ready to see. You know, it's, if these brands made a statement, and again, Lululemon is near and dear to my heart, so it's not an assault on Lululemon. And like you said, they were very clearly stunned by the question and perhaps a little bit unprepared. But it's just that was, to me, a missed opportunity to create ease within the community, right? And many of their ambassadors are of color, and also to potentially create a bit of change. And that isn't to say they're not working on it, but it is to say that it was a moment where they could have really done the right thing, I guess.
Yeah, well, it's such a niche market. Like, I understand that when you're talking about Black women's hair and the accessories or the needs for it are it's so niche that I don't think that every retailer can like fill that space. I mean, I also worked in retail and in business. It may not be the thing to like be specialized in, right? But there are some uniqueness to the design. I'm not a designer. I don't know, but I know that I know the texture, and it's not just Black women, but even when you think of biracial, like or curly hair or whatever the case is, like to have a swimming cap that would make it where it's not drying out, it fits over, yeah, like getting wet, that it's more volume in the type of style of hair, if you have twist, afro, like whatever the style is, that there's some flexibility in that. And so it is a really great space. And maybe that's where we would see more women of color in the pool and in swimming. And so because that is the first thing that was embedded into me as a young girl. So I know that there's so many other Black girls or young Black women that are carrying that that legacy, that inherited legacy as well.
Absolutely.
Actually, right before you came on, I made a comment and I don't even remember what I said, but I think I said that Black women's hair is one of the things where it's not a big deal because it's hair, but it is a big deal for Black women. And we had this whole discussion about that right before you came on. And it's not something that you would necessarily, like you said, it's very niche. So it's not something you would understand unless you had a Black friend or you asked or you engaged in this conversation, right? About like the culture and why your hair has different texture and the care and the products that you use. And I found even just that conversation so interesting about hair and the power behind the hair, your hair. And so there wasn't really a question in there. I just thought like your swim cap comment opened up a Pandora's box of like this whole other topic about hair.
Yeah, and let me tell you, I will be the first to say I am I should not speak about Black women's hair. I mean, I can't even do my own. So I am it's just not my thing. I'm so far away from it. I would say that I wouldn't even know because I don't do it on my own. So when I tell you, I am like every stylist, I go every single week and they will tell you that I've never known a Black woman that does not understand or do anything to their hair. So I don't even know. However, it's important to me when in those spaces to be an advocate and to speak to what is missing, because someone could feel and be excluded if it's not, particularly when you're talking about product, and I want to retract what I say that Black women's hair, it's like a niche market. It's no more niche than someone that needs it for the physical ability, right? When you look at the adaptive wear for physical ability due to physical ability, that is a niche as well. And so I want to retract what I say that it is niche, because that's what's important to Black women and that's what's needed, period. So it's not even a niche. So when we make things a niche, we make it hard. Mm-hmm. And then we make excuses for not getting it done and getting it right. So I want to retract my statement in that.
Retracted.
But I do like that you said that, because I think that that's sort of a part of the ways, I mean, I'm making an assumption, but the ways in which white supremacy has had an effect is that oftentimes many of us, right, don't necessarily understand our hair. And we're just sort of getting to know our hair. And we live in a time right now where we're in another renaissance of celebration of Blackness. I mean, we're always in this moment. It's this constant moment, but where Black hair in the crown is not just being accepted, it's that women, people of color in general, are saying, I'm not going to hide, diminish, or alter myself for the appeasement of white bodies and to soften or make more pleasant to the white gaze. But instead, I am going to exist how I am. And we see that with the very slow movement of the Crown Act making its way across the country, as like the legalization of Black people wearing their hair as it naturally grows out of their hair, out of their head, and not being penalized for it. But I do think that, like you said, viewing it as niche is problematic in so many ways.
Yeah, it's the Crown Act. It's really great that is that's happening, and it started in California first. It's also very disheartening that we have to have laws around the physical appearance of individuals to protect them. And I'm in grad school right now, and it's a specialization in diversity, equity, and social justice. And my research right now is in the disparities and inequities of Black women in the workforce. And while, the research is there, I find it to be so disheartening, and the sense that spaces are, there's this intersectionality of societal norms that are obviously built on historical white policies, supremacy, etc. And then that trickles into so many other organized things, and like workplaces, sports, yoga. And I personally think that we've just kind of, and I'm generalizing and speaking, and I'm trying to be really careful with my words, but because I'm also a product of this, right? We go along for what the status quo is. And what we're seeing over the last few years, as we've become a more diverse society generationally, and younger generations becoming more diverse as well, like the majority will be the minority, that the status quo isn't acceptable any longer. And so now what we're having to do is untangle what existed to what is applicable now. And that is really anti-racism work that we all are responsible for. That me as a brown body, you, Asian, like all of the intersectionalities, we are responsible for looking at systematic barriers that prohibit individuals from having access to whatever that is, if it's yoga, if it's in a workplace, if it's someone not being able to fully present themselves and they have to edit or over edit themselves in order to fit into different environments. It's the work of all of us to basically call in what that behavior is and that barrier, and really analyze it and refine it, and then start speaking about the solution. I'm in this period right now where I'm really done talking about the problem, because the problem is, we know what the problem is. Like, we know what it is. So like, let's, and to me, the problem and reanalyzing the problem 100 different ways is, number one, fatiguing. Number two, it breaks my heart. And I really want to start talking about solutions. We're all smart beings. We're all smart human beings. We have the answers within. What it requires is for us to really get uncomfortable, to feel the feelings of discomfort, to really feel the feelings of fear, the feelings of disgust, the feelings of anger, and move through those feelings in order to get on the other side of it, of courage and love, to really elevate the whole for all people. And it could be because of my lived experience by growing up in Nebraska, a predominantly white state, a fourth of my family is white, being in mostly white spaces where I feel honestly mostly comfortable because, and my extended family all in DC where it's predominantly Black. So I've had to navigate these two worlds a lot. And so I really, by default, I look through the lens of who is missing, what can I do to amplify the voice of people that are not there, and how can I really deconstruct something and just say it plainly. Like if I go into a meeting and someone keeps saying you guys and it's all women, I'm like, that is the wording is just not inclusive. If I'm in a meeting and if it's all men in the meeting or in the room, I'm like, we're most likely going to get this one outcome here, you know, and that's the same in like yoga spaces as well. It's the same in yoga in sweat studios that I go into as well. Same thing, you get the same results. How is there growth, capital, and sustainability in that? So, you know, I naturally think that way all the time. And I think that more people have to challenge themselves to think in that way more. Not even think about it. Well, yeah, think about it and act on it.
You said that we all know the problem, and you're at a space and stage now where you just want to come up with solutions and you're done talking about it. And I feel like that too. I feel like
Yeah,
if you're living in 2021 with the
exactly.
level of technology and resources out there, if you don't know about racism and all this stuff, then you clearly chose not to know. But there are clearly people who are in denial or don't want to look at it, as why Brittany and I started this podcast, because a lot of our, well, I don't know necessarily if they're a part of my community anymore, but a lot of these spiritual people, and I say that in air quotes, were even saying things like, I don't see color, I don't see race, like all lives matter, that kind of stuff. So there are clearly people who are unconscious to it or don't choose to see it. So I feel like at that level, you can't take action if you are not willing to admit that there's a problem here that affects people who don't look like you. So you said that you are very vocal. You open up your throat chakra and you say what you notice, but not a lot of people are that I guess like bold yet. How were you able to alchemize like your fire to actually speak it out?
Yeah, you know, you brought up a couple of things. I think that if you're especially if you're in teaching, and if you're teaching or an instructor, it's irresponsible to lead people, in my opinion, by not deconstructing your own bias. And to me, when I hear things like all lives matter, one of the things that I do by day and work is I do these intercultural assessments. They're intercultural assessments, and it puts an individual on a continuum maturity model. Most people do fall in minimization, like this minimization mindset, where they will say all lives matter, or I don't see color, or anything. And people can do something. It doesn't have to be these monumental things. So if I hear that, which I did hear from a former yoga teacher of mine, and ironically, it took her 4 years to come back and now finally today make a statement about the inequities that she sees. That is, to me, as the teacher, where we do have to practice. You know, I teach yoga. It's like we have to practice and be with the student where they're at, right? So like, you know, a guru doesn't become a guru overnight. And in most yoga books that you hear, when they go to, you know, the guru or they go to their master and they say, I'm ready to be enlightened, I'm ready to be enlightened. And they'll say, leave and come back 7 years later and then tell me. So it does take time. However, in that moment, I like to say, okay, you don't see color, but what color are my pants? What color is my shirt?
Tricky.
that right there. And they will say, so you do see color.
Mm-hmm.
So now that you see it, start asking individuals of color about their lived experience of being the only one in the space. And then turn it back to that person and say, tell me a moment and when you were in a space where you felt excluded. How did that feel? What was your body sensations? What did that feel like for you? Now take that and flip it. Like look around and flip it. That is doing something, because that is getting into the level of inquiry and curiosity. And a huge part of yoga is about the self-study. It's one of the core ethical principles of yoga is self-study. So there is that, so there is that self-study of, and obviously, there's non-harming. Am I causing harm by grouping everyone in the same? Yeah, there's harm in that, right? And so how can I be more open to the experiences of others and use the teaching to move through my own discomfort, right? Like the teachings are there for an individual to practice self, move through their own discomfort, because half the time people, excuse my language, are in their own shit. So if we become if we become a little less self-interested and more collective interested, then we begin to really see things through the other people's eyes. It's not about us. Like the practice is there for us to wake up and be open. And yoga is a skill in action to really journey people back to themselves and to undo harm and injustices. And so, to say that of like the spiritual world, wellness world, enlightened, as a teacher, as an instructor, if we are bringing these practices to heal people, to help people heal, to help people see their fullest potential, and to empower people, it is our responsibility to also ensure that we are doing the work for ourselves in anti-racism and in bias, so that we can be better teachers and space holders and container creators for others.
Wow. You say that, and you said specifically, yoga is a skill in action. Shout out to Michelle Johnson and her amazing book. But I think that that's sort of where there's a little bit of a disconnect, right? Is that very often the wellness community sees yoga as a workout, and then sometimes as a stress reliever, but not as often as a blueprint for how we can move forward and evolve, to really recognize each other and support one another, starting inward and moving outward. And I think that, as you said before, it's irresponsible and it's harmful, as teachers and as space holders, if we don't do the work, if we don't get just a little bit uncomfortable, if we don't take that extra effort. It can be minimal, right? To create safe spaces for as many people as possible, for as many beings as possible. As you were speaking, I just kept thinking, it feels like we're in the beginning, right? Where people are just sort of beginning to understand how harmful we have been in the past, but we often see that as the past and not who we are now. And I was actually doing yoga this morning to Alan Watts, and he was talking about that, about how we look at the ways that people have done harm in the past, and we've thought, oh man, those people were so bad, without understanding that a lot of that has come from the intention of doing good. But my point is that we're at the beginning, and you specifically have created an organization that sort of brings yoga to people who may not necessarily have access to it, or creates a more equitable environment. Can you speak to that and how?
Yeah, okay, so yeah, you're absolutely right. So the organization that I created, it's on pause, it's under construction. My inner hearing told me that right now the water is shark filled. There's like this cancer culture that is rampant. We know this, right? And I don't want, especially, in the yoga wellness world, there's yoga world, there's so many different things that are happening right now. When we talk about communities being really rocked based on uh, sexual misconduct from teachers to students, to inequities that are in the space, to, this really, how I feel it, like this really angry way of telling people to stop doing yoga, which that's just not my MO, how I roll. And so I'm like, I need to put this on pause, because having this come out, in a way, I want to be respectful, right? There's a lot that I still have to learn. I don't know everything. I think there's so much that I still need to study and learn in yoga, and teachers that I need to bring in to help diversify my levels of teaching. However, what it is, it's still alive and well in my heart, and still cooking, it's still birthing. Is the Yoga Coalition. And the Yoga Coalition is, yoga right now is $1 billion industry, $1 billion industry. And it's phenomenal. And the one aspect that we really focus on in yoga is asana. And there's yoga studios on every corner, everywhere you go. And so my lens of a corporate America leader, I know that not all studio owners, a lot of studio owners may or may not have worked in corporate America, and or look at what is diversity, equity, and inclusion that impact my bottom line, right? Because as a studio owner, you want to get members, you want to open a studio to bring this practice to communities, and you need to keep your doors open, and not really thinking about it as having a focus around diversity, equity, and inclusion is essential to my bottom line, and to ensuring that I'm really bringing the right intentions to the practice. So there's a couple of pillars where there is in the works an index where studio owners can take a look at an index to say, what does good look like? What does good look like when it comes to the diversity of my membership, the number of teachers on my staff, and the diversity of those teachers? It feels really rigid to think about that. However, large companies like a Lululemon or a Nike, if they're being held accountable, right, to diversity strategies and initiatives, every other small business should be too. Like, it can't just be these big players. Like, we all have to have skin in the game if we really want to make it more equitable. So an index where studios, if a studio owner wants to be part of this index, there's, based on my experience in this, like some quantifiers where it's on a point scale. And that point scale, you'll receive that. And here's a toolkit that that studios can make over the course of a year in order to make their communities more diverse, their teachings more diverse. And once they do that, then they can be certified by the Yoga Coalition. So there's an accountability to it. Because you always get those things in the cities, like the best of, and you're the best of yoga studios. And I'm like, what makes the studio the best? I go in the studio, it's great. It looks like every other thing, but what makes it the best? To me, it's not the best when it all looks the same. It's not the best. So really, what is the best? What does good look like, right? So more accountability. Secondly, is bringing yoga teacher training to more individuals of color and having community outreach connected to that. I don't believe in anything is free. Trust me. The free giveaways and That I just don't do that. Everything is earned. You have to work for it. You have to have skin in the game to work hard to earn something. If there's more of an appreciation for that. And it's a little me being old school. And then there's something else. I'm drawing a blank, but those are the two main things right now. And so as I continue studying and learning from my teachers, and as I keep listening to what's happening in the world of yoga and looking at what's needed, I'm getting really clear, more clear in where this needs to go. So it's still there. The website's still there. The whole business strategy is still there. However, I'm not an expert in anti-racism. I'm not an expert in decolonization like practices. And so I want to ensure that I have the right voices and people that if I would want them to bring in their expertise, that it aligns also with like the mission, the purpose, and the feeling of the Yoga Coalition. Like I want people to feel, I don't want people to feel bad when they walk away from it. However, I want people to feel accountable and empowered to do something. And that's how I work. Because making someone feel bad and ripping it all apart, or having someone be sludged through the mud about something that they're not doing, that is the antithesis of this practice. Mm-hmm. And so, and I've seen it happen to some friends of mine on social media, and that's harmful. It's harmful.
Yeah, we actually have spoken to a lot of thought leaders in yoga who also do anti-racism and decolonization work. And we're always, even Britt and I, when we talk about these topics, we're constantly balancing like calling people in and being friendlier without padding our words and without having to not, hold people accountable. And it's such an interesting balance because I'm always of the mindset like, come on, you could do better. And Britt's like, but we get more bees with honey. Like more people will be involved if we're not like attacking them. So it's a balance that we're even, constantly thinking about as we put out our content. But also, I was curious about your yoga coalition and if you speak about appropriation in yoga as well.
Yeah. So a couple of things that you said, I always like to think about calling in, but adding on to that calling up, like calling a person up to their highest self. So you bring them in. There's clear is kind. Like Brene Brown does some really great work around shame and being clear. It's like you call them in, like, let's sit down and have a talk. And then you really call them up, like you bring them above the line to step into their fullest power, like to their personal power, stepping them into that. So that's where the accountability comes, and they walk away feeling like they can do something with that. Because by calling them in and then leaving them with nothing, it's like, well, it feels the same as like being shamed. I think it'd be really beautiful as well if we collaborated together. Listen, I am not a good worker alone in my own head. And so it'd be really great if we collaborated with like the Yoga Coalition and the work that you both are doing to really co-collaborate in this index together. That would be really amazing. I think that collaboration work is really great. Yeah. And I think it would be like your community and Test Market, we bring this together and we bring this out together. Very similar to the McKinsey report, about women. women in the workplace. They leverage catalysts, they leverage lean in. And the more that we can get thought leaders together to really think about having this solid index around it would be really beautiful. And I would love your brains, because you two, I easily resonate with quite a bit. But
Thank you.
going to your question, what was your question now? It was,
It
what
was
was
about, well, first of all, thank you for that compliment. I really feel like Brittany definitely mellows out my fire because I'm like, let's get them all. You know, she's like, no, we need to like call people in. And I'm always like, yes, we do. Yes, we do. So thank you for feeling that essence of us. And we would love to talk more about your offering. I guess my question was about appropriation, and that's a part of the index and the coalition.
Yeah, great. I love that, Brittany, you're bringing a little bit of sattva quality to it. Like, rawr, it's just like, that's really great. Yeah, the pitta and you getting out there.
She's so pitta.
So the cultural appropriation. Okay, so this is another pillar of the coalition, is bringing educational resources into teacher trainings. So a huge part of the work that I do is inclusion and diversity education as well. And so over the past year, I have spent time with about 8 yoga studios where I've been a part of their 200-hour program and doing inclusion and diversity training. And it's really great because what I don't do anti-racism. I think Michelle Johnson, like there's individuals like that, that's their lane. I'm here for basic foundation 101, right? Like if you want to get to the level of anti-racism, that is like a specialized skill and you have to take people through the journey. I'm really good at getting people in the beginning. So within that, there is cultural appropriation. And I discuss what, we give different situations of cultural appropriation, what that looks like. And, for me, when I think about things like being culturally appropriate, I've always shared in any of the trainings, like if you are second guessing something, then it's better to like not include it, right? To like really understand if there's something that you're wanting to do is, hello, Google is our friend, is to really look at, number one, if there's like a quote that someone wants to post on Instagram to use as like their dharma, when they're sharing out on, I look on their Instagram channels or whatever, like know the person, right? If you're just reading Robert Kelly, who knows? Robert Kelly could be this huge yogi, and that's a arbitrary and fictitious name. But Robert Kelly could have done X, Y, and Z to whoever student. And do you really want to use that person, or how are they culturally appropriate, right? So I think about that, like the responsibility of knowing. And I think that it's also, I had a couple of instances where there was a yoga studio locally here in Minneapolis, and they posted something on their Instagram, literally at the height of all of the protests and everything. And it was one of the most, I don't even remember what it was, but it was so, talk about classic cultural appropriation. And I literally messaged that studio and I said, this is not okay. And, with one of the studio owners where I teach at, there was like a slang word on like these candles or something. And I was like, is that really what we want to stand for? Like, is that really how we want to speak? Like we don't need a candle that has like the F word with like the logo. Like, is that really like, it was tongue in cheek, right? But it's like, I get that it's tongue in cheek, and do we really want that? Like, is that how we want to teach people to communicate? And like their first line in yoga, because nowhere in like Yoga Sutras am I reading like the F word anywhere, right? Yeah. And Maya Angelou, I listened to this podcast of Maya Angelou, and she talked about like language and how she
Oh,
used to
yeah.
swear. Right? Wasn't that so good? I
It
was
was
like,
with Oprah. Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I need to stop swearing. I need to clean up
Oh
my
no,
language.
I have to clean up my
Yeah,
language.
I know. It was
Mhm.
so
Me
powerful.
too.
It was so
Yeah.
like those small, subtle shifts. So I think of things like that as culturally appropriate, you know, as well. And like, really, what are we focusing on? Like, at the end of the day, I really look at cultural appropriation, not only how we're like using the terms, like, because they're, you know, it's not always going to be right. Do we need to learn the enunciation and art of saying something in Sanskrit? Absolutely. Are people going to make a mistake? Absolutely. You know, so there are things that I still can't say, and we can stumble over those words if we know that we're getting to the end result. But what I like to think of is like, we have to just be super conscious in how we're using it. And if it's in misalignment with the teachings, then it's culturally appropriate, you know. And there is a really huge yogi that's out there in social media right now doing a lot of really great work, and the message around cultural appropriation, white supremacy. However, the way that it's delivered, I had to stop following. I was like, I just can't get down with this. Like, there's a way in which we do it where it just doesn't get roped in to all the things. I don't know, but I'm very traditionalist in some of those ways. And part, I'm like, okay, well, we're teaching about cultural appropriation, but this does look like cultural appropriation just by like marketing yourself to like be cool and like catchy for like modern day, like these TikToks and reels. Like, it's doesn't resonate with me. So the message is lost, right? So I think about that, like, how do we lose the message? And things like that. And speaking of, Brittany, which you'll know this, I think that this is really good work that Lululemon did, is that they were using a lot of terminology from yoga to describe the product of, and they removed all the Sanskrit words from product. And like, when we talk about decolonizing and doing anti-racism work, it's things like that that are really bold. And for Lululemon to change the names and, you know, to do all that, I'm sure it was a big task to evaluate, to go through all of the names, to, you know, phase out old tags, to bring them back in, to have discussions, make investments in that. And it's simple. It's so small. I think personally too, cultural appropriation on social media is when you're using tokenism as well.
Oh,
I think
God.
that I think that if I go onto a page and all I see are white images of people, to me, that is cultural appropriation. It just is. Like, it is what it is. And so I think that that's, you know, we have to think about that. It's really disrupting our lens. It's upgrading our eye prescription. Just like you go to the eye doctor to get your eyes checked to see if it's 20/20. I should never use 20. We need to like just call it perfect. I don't know, perfect vision. Because when we say 20/20, I'm like, well, but 20/20 was really revealing. It did take the bifocals off of us, but
right?
it's
okay.
I know it did. There's like, you thought you could see. Let me make sure that you really can see, right? So you know, I think that it's really looking at things with a fine-tuned comb, and that does take slowing down to speed up. It does take individuals balancing their nervous system. And Brittany is right, Laura. Like, we cannot, like, a friend of mine, she's a yoga teacher, and she said, we are Pitta dominant and Vata deranged, and we all need kapha.
I like
And
that.
like, it's so true. Quote Megan Foley on that. It's so true. And so, and by us operating in dominant Pitta and Vata, our nervous systems are so active, so high, that we just throw out the quick things, like quick band-aids, and we don't thoughtfully think through things. And then that's where tokenism starts happening. That's where cultural appropriation starts happening. That's where all of the intentions that we think are good end up failing. When if we take 2 steps backwards and say, who do I need to bring in to thoughtfully think about this in a way that is really even, grounded, true north, I can have a better outcome and not cause intentional harm or not be a product of causing unintentional harm. And so we have a responsibility to do that right now as leaders in this space, in the wellness space, because the world and individuals are really suffering mentally, emotionally, physically. We've had complex trauma over the past year and a half, and we have the most beautiful opportunity and gift given to us to really bring people home back to themselves. And, that's all I want to do. And so whatever that takes to remove barriers, to bring that to people, like we have to do that work too. The bringing the healing to people is also doing the heavy lifting in an area where you're like, I don't know how to do anti-racism work. Well, you didn't know how to teach yoga, or you didn't know how to teach a berries class, or you didn't know how to teach your first whatever class, and you figured it out along the way. So it's reading the instruction manual and teaching the class and preparing the most well-balanced meal all at the same time. And it's bringing in, diversifying your own circle so that, like, this conversation is so beautiful. You two combining together, bringing me in, diversifying one's own circle so that people can contribute and be of contribution to what it is that you want to be up to when it comes to decolonization, anti-racism, in the yoga and wellness space.
Ooh.
Wow.
You came in with the fire.
Listen, I just came off of a yoga retreat with my yoga teacher, and I'm in this research paper. Please bless me that I get through this paper by Sunday. So I am coming in hot with so many things. And it's really vital to our long-term well-being.
Yes.
We can't, our health is at stake with this, our livelihood, the length of our lives. And I don't say that lightly. I mean, it is true. So when we look statistically at the inequities when it comes to health and people of color, and then break that down, the people of color, and break that down by gender, we can't afford to have modern day genocides because we're not giving the resources to people in underrepresented communities that are impacted based on systems that don't want them to belong.
Yeah.
We can't be where the system is at. We have to be above the system to help give the resources.
Above the system and reaching down to help
Yes.
the individuals that
And
are ready
pull.
to. Yes.
Yes, exactly. Like, I volunteered at a school that's here, a charter school, a friend of mine, and he is white, and he created this charter school because he wanted to help with the inequities in education in Minnesota. And so most of the students that go to this school, about 94% of the students qualify for reduced lunch. And when I would go in to volunteer in the school, there were days where I would see parents like run in with no shoes on, no socks on in the dead of winter along with their children. I was in a classroom where a second grader stood on the table and threw his chair across the room out of anger. But like, these are lived environments in which students are living. Yeah. And so they don't know how to process anger and stress. They see it in their environments, right? And so I did yoga and breathing with the students, and it was just so great. It brings me to tears thinking about it. Like the 3rd and 4th graders, like asking them, do they know about mindfulness? And they'd be like, home, home, and bring their hands together, you know? And I said, well, what do you feel? And they were like, I feel calm. I feel like I can breathe. I feel peace. And then one said, I don't feel stressed, which I was like, okay, you know what that means? And I was like, and he probably does feel stressed. Like all these feelings inside of me, I don't know what that is, and could put it in the right context. And so I was like, yeah, these kids get it. They need this. They understand the benefits of it. And so if we really want to stop or curb the intergenerational health disparities, we got to start it at such a young age and get this out to communities that need it most. So 94% of those students that qualified reduced housing, most of them also were in single family homes, probably where the single parent wasn't 100% present. That statistically aligns with that. So of course they don't know how to handle situations, and then it becomes cyclical, so.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. That just reminds me of how also like us as a community who are more privileged really need to think about how to help children as well, so they can stop the, I guess, their intergenerational pattern.
Yeah. We all have privilege, right? There is privilege by race, and there's privilege by our means, our resources, our socioeconomic status, our influence. And we just have to pick the area that we want to leverage that privilege and get in that lane and drive.
Yeah. Kelly Palmer really speaks to that. And it's so true. It really just shines light on all the things that we do have. Not that there aren't issues within each group, but that if you have a little bit of privilege, why not use that to support? I want to ask you, what is your hope for the not so distant future?
Oh gosh, there's so many hopes that I have. It breaks my hope for the future is that, speaking with brevity, is that we really begin to become more centralized and return back to center. We become less of an individualistic society, and we become a collective society where it's not about me and what's happening to me. These rights are infringing upon my rights only, but really about how does it impact the whole, like my neighbor. Because when I know that someone is looking out for me, I don't have to look out for myself. Yourself is automatically taken care of if you look out for someone else. In the military, they always would say, like, I got your six. A friend shared this with me. Someone in the military, it's like, I got your 12 or I got your 6. But basically it's like, I got your back. Right. And so it's like, your back is against my back. I cover this side, you cover that side. And like divide and collect versus like, I'm only focusing on me. You would never do that to a person, like if you were in war. Right. And we've seen that happen through the pandemic. We're all out here buying all this damn toilet paper, doing all these things.
Oh my God,
the
toilet paper. Yeah.
I know. I'm like, what happened about knocking on your neighbor's door? Like, yo, I ran out of toilet paper. Can I have a roll? Like,
they will not answer.
Why? I'm like, I have no shame in the game here. So it's like how that's my hope for the distant future, is that we become less individualistic, also my hope for the future, if we're getting real, is that we deconstruct our two-party system.
Mm-hmm.
My also distant hope for the future is that we don't get fatigued. Let me say what I don't want is that we sustain the work that we need to do in order for people to live equitably. What that means is having access to basic needs. When we think of unsheltered population, children, when I think about immigrants coming into the country because of natural disasters in their own country,
Mm-hmm.
And that we treat them like humans.
Mm-hmm.
And so all in that is that we become less individualistic, more collective, and really rebalance our humanity.
Wow, same.
Right?
Yeah, everything you just said.
Yeah. I pray that every day. And it's like, it overwhelms me. Honestly, there have been a couple of days where I have panic attacks over it. Because it's like, gosh, I'm only one person, but if I can help influence one other person, and that person, I pass the candle to that person. And we all do that. If we all remain in that collective spirit.
Yeah, I think that's why when we do this podcast, Britt and I, it gives me so much hope because we get to talk to people who are doing the work and we get to talk to people who are creating change in their own way, in their own way, special way, right? Some people it's through yoga, activism, it's through music, and um, that is why I love doing this podcast and interviewing people like you because it gives me hope that there are people out there who care and we all want the same thing. We all want a collectivist mindset where we take care of each other and basic human needs for everybody involved. True unity consciousness.
Totally. I love that. You're so right. And it's like, if we all want that, why in the heck aren't we doing it?
I
Right?
know.
Well,
What are you all doing over here?
What are you doing? Exactly.
That's a whole nother podcast, right?
Ah,
What are you doing over there?
right. Yeah, exactly. And I think that it's, oh gosh, I was talking to a dear friend of mine, and I think that it's a little bit about us growing up. I don't know how old you all are. I'm,
30s.
Yeah, I'm in my 40s, mid 40s. And so it just became, I'm like, oh my gosh, when did we grow up? When did we now become the people?
Mm-hmm.
When did we become the people that now need to influence the future distant?
Yeah.
So my good friend and I were like, do you remember when we were working and we had managers and then our bosses were telling us what to do, but now we're the ones that actually have to make those decisions? I was like, oh, right. So a little bit of that is like, oh my gosh, you need to grow up now because your parents aren't the ones that are doing it. They're like, look, we did our time. We're retired. Peaced out.
Yeah.
My mom's like calling me today, like, I'm buying New Kids on the Block tickets for us. I'm like, Mom, I'm working, and she's like trying to figure out how to get on Ticketmaster.
Yeah.
And like, that's her most important thing, right? Where I'm like, I have a paper due. I have work to do. What are you talking about? And so, and so now we're in that sea of influence and decision making and really changing the way that we want the future. And so I'm like, oh, right. You need to grow in that pair of shoes fast, like fast. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I think there's a little bit of that. It's like a little bit of that awakening. It's like, oh, it's you.
Mm-hmm.
It's you.
It's up to us.
Yeah. So so that answers my question of like, what are we going to do? And it's like, oh yeah, now. So
it just reminds me of that meme that's going around or the TikTok video that people are superimposing themselves over the voice. And they're like, it's weird now. I'm an adult and I'm unsupervised. That's how I feel like we are. We're like, okay, we have to make the decisions now. We're the adults, like ready or not. It's a little dangerous, but we're going to make some decisions.
exactly. And if we want to talk about stopping intergenerational trauma and all that stuff, I'm like, we're the ones that are going to stop it.
Yes.
Like we're the ones that have to be responsible for stopping it.
Mm-hmm.
So we can't talk and like, let's say we need to stop. No, we just need to stop it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, it's that really hit me over the head last year. Like, okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. My family was like, when did you get so serious? And I was like, 2020.
We have to be.
Exactly. Everything was play until 2020, and it was like, grow up.
I was like, oh. Oh, well, thank you so much, Ericka. We will link all of your information in the show notes so that people can find out about you and the work that you do, and any way we can support you in the work you do. Obviously, let us know. But thank you for your wisdom and your time.
Yeah, and I'll send a follow-up email. Let's get jamming on that work together. I would love it.
I'm into it.